Young boy never broke again, and I'm gonna tell you exactly who I am. 10 years old, North Baton Rouge, Chippewa 38th Street, growing up in Louisiana City. I think I need help. I got an anger problem. It actually hurt someone, and now I'm sitting back like, damn, I can't do it all in one day.
New at 10 tonight, rapper NBA Youngboy and a female companion are in the Atlantic City jail tonight.
Atlanta police say they arrested the two at a downtown hotel.
Picture this, a 7-year-old boy writing rap lyrics in his notebook while his father sits in a cell facing 55 years. His mother, out living her own life. His grandmother, the only person who ever truly loved him, and she's about to be taken away too. By the time Kentrell Deshaun Gaulden turned 16, he'd already survived a broken neck, witnessed his best friend murdered at a memorial for gun violence victims, caught an attempted murder charge, and lost the only maternal figure who ever cared about him. Most kids that age are worried about prom and college applications. Kentrell was facing decades in prison while simultaneously becoming one of the biggest rappers on the planet. This is the untold story of NBA Youngboy, but more importantly, this is the story of the Gaulden family. The broken homes, the absent parents, the grandmother who tried to save a child from the streets, and the cold reality of North Baton Rouge that shaped one of rap's most prolific and controversial artists. I'm talking about a kid who grew up on 38th Street in one of America's most dangerous cities, where the robbery rate is double the national average and young boys don't make it to 20. A kid whose father taught him that robbery was in his genes. A kid whose uncle got his head blown off during a lick. A kid who had nobody, absolutely nobody, except one woman who would die before she could see him make it out. By the end of this documentary, you're gonna understand why Youngboy raps with so much pain in his voice. You're gonna understand why he can't trust nobody, why he moves the way he moves, and why he says the only time he feels love is when he walks on stage. This ain't just another rapper story. This is about survival, abandonment, and what happens when the streets raise a child that the system forgot about. Stay locked in because the Gaulden family story is darker than you think. Let's start from the beginning. North Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Specifically 38th Street and Chippewa. This ain't the Baton Rouge you see in LSU football games or downtown tourist spots. This is the North Side, where gunshots are more common than ice cream trucks, where young boys are recruited by gangs before they hit puberty, and where the cycle of poverty and violence has been spinning for generations. Baton Rouge has a robbery rate over double the national average. In the neighborhoods where Kentrell grew up, most crimes go unsolved. Not because the police don't know who did it, but because nobody's talking. Snitching gets you killed. The code of the streets is law. This is where the Gaulden family planted their roots. And this is where Kentrell Deshaun Gaulden was born on October 20th, 1999. Let's talk about Kentrell's father first. Jeffrey Tate, also known as Jeffrey Staten in some records. Now, if you listen to Youngboy's music, you'll hear him reference his pops constantly. But here's the thing, Youngboy barely knows this man. In his own words, "My daddy in jail. I talk to him every day. He just been wanting money, and though I still call him daddy to make him feel like somebody. I barely know him though." Think about that for a second. Youngboy talks to his father every day, sends him money, calls him daddy. But he doesn't actually know him. He ain't seen the dude since he was 4 years old. So what happened? Why has Jeffrey Tate been locked up since Youngboy was a little kid? December 1st. 2009. That's the day that changed everything. Jeffrey Tate and 3 other men, including his own brother Dallas Staten, walked into Albee's Market, a convenience store in Delhi, Baton Rouge, around 9 a.m. This wasn't some random robbery. This was calculated, planned, and it was about to go horribly wrong. According to court documents, Jeffrey approached an employee named Sam Tran, who was working at the check cashing station inside the store. Jeffrey pulled out a gun and ordered Tran to get on the ground. When Tran didn't move fast enough, Jeffrey hopped over the counter and pistol whipped him across the head. One of Jeffrey's accomplices then zip-tied Tran's wrists and threw a bag over his head. They cleared out the cash registers, but Jeffrey wasn't satisfied. He went back to Tran, who's already tied up and bleeding, and demanded more money. Tran told them the store had a safe with more cash, but it would take 10 minutes to open. Jeffrey wasn't trying to hear that. He kept demanding money, getting more aggressive, more violent, and then he shot Sam Tran in the leg. Jeffrey and his crew ran out of the store, leaving Tran bleeding on the floor. Now, in a city like Baton Rouge where the robbery rate is sky high, most crimes like this don't get solved. The cops need witnesses, evidence, cooperation. And that's where the story takes a dark turn, because the person who snitched on Jeffrey Tate was his own blood brother. Dallas Staten, Jeffrey's brother, Youngboy's uncle, was brought in for questioning. and it took less than an hour for him to start singing like a canary. Dallas told the cops everything. He claimed Jeffrey had been talking about robbing the store for weeks. He said Jeffrey wanted him to wear a mask and help with the robbery, even wanted to use Dallas's apartment to plan the whole thing. Dallas claimed he refused, said he wanted no part of it. But here's where it gets messy. Dallas was actually at the store when the robbery went down. He claimed it was just a coincidence that he was there to cash a check for a friend, but the evidence told a different story. Surveillance footage showed Dallas participating in the robbery. He was the one who zip-tied the victims. He was the one who helped clear out the registers. And when Jeffrey shot Sam Tran and ran out, Dallas stayed behind, untied Tran, said sorry, and then ran out to warn Jeffrey that one of the employees had grabbed a gun. Years later, Youngboy would rap about this exact moment on his track Cross Me. Uncle told, now my daddy doing 55. That's not just a bar, that's the truth. Dallas Staten snitched on his own brother, and Jeffrey Tate got hit with 55 years in prison, 10 years for armed robbery, 50 years for attempted first-degree murder. Kentrell was only 8 years old when his father got sentenced. 8 years old, and the only male role model in his life, flawed as he was, got taken away for what's essentially a life sentence. But here's the thing that's even more messed up. Jeffrey Tate wasn't just a criminal. He was a product of the same streets that would later try to swallow his son. Robbery wasn't just something Jeffrey did, it was something the Gaulden family seemed to be known for. Jeffrey wasn't the only one in the family with a reputation for robbery. Kentrell's uncle on his mother's side, Andy Gaulden, was also allegedly a known robber in Baton Rouge. But Andy's story ends even worse than Jeffrey's. Andy Gaulden was shot in the head and killed during a robbery attempt. The details are murky, but Youngboy has referenced his uncle's death multiple times in his music. On the track Akbar, he raps about hearing stories of how his uncle was shot in the head, implying their relationship was probably non-existent or distant. On Rip Lil Dave, Youngboy speaks about his uncle who got shot in the head and died while hitting a lick. And on 38 Baby, he outright declares that Andy Gaulden was his uncle, which means, in his words, robbery is in my genes. Think about what that means for a young kid growing up. Your father is serving 55 years for armed robbery. Your uncle on your father's side snitched and is probably in witness protection or dead himself. Your uncle on your mother's side got his brains blown out during a robbery. What kind of message does that send to an 8-year-old boy? What kind of future does that kid see for himself? But if the men in the Gaulden family were absent or dead, where was Kentrell's mother, Shirhonda Gaulden, or as the internet knows her now, Ms. Shirhonda, Youngboy's mom who went viral for rapping on Instagram and doing interviews about her son? But back when Kentrell was growing up, Shirhonda wasn't really in the picture. Now, before we go any further, let me be clear. Shirhonda was young when she had Kentrell. She was 22 years old, trying to figure out her own life. She wasn't a bad person. She was just a young woman who wasn't ready to be a mother. In interviews, Shirhonda has been open about her situation back then. She was working 2 jobs, one from 5 a.m. to 4 p.m., then another job after that, sometimes not getting home until 10:30 or 11 p.m. She'd wake up at 5 a.m., drop her kids off at her mother's house, go to work, come home to make sure they were straight, then head to her second job. By the time she got back, it was late and the kids were already asleep at her mother's house. In her own words, my mama always was like, leave Kentrell here, leave Kentrell here. Because where I was staying in Scotlandville on Avenue J, they called it the field. They had a lot of children, they sold drugs and stuff, so Kentrell, he would run up to the cars and get the weed, get the money to the people, whatever, and I found out, so I left him at my mama's house a little bit more than my other children. So even at 8 or 9 years old, Kentrell was already getting involved in the streets. He was running up to cars, playing middleman in drug deals, getting exposed to a lifestyle that most kids don't see until they're teenagers, if at all. Shirhonda knew what was happening, and she made the decision to leave Kentrell with his grandmother more often. Not because she didn't love him, but because she was trying to protect him from the environment she was living in. But here's the harsh reality. Kentrell didn't see it that way. On his track Lonely Child, Youngboy opens up about his relationship with his mother. My mama, she all about a nigga. She used to put me before niggas. She'll put me out and shit. That's pain right there. That's a son saying his mother chose men over him, that she would put him out of the house for a man. And then he says something even more devastating. My grandma made me feel loved, and when she died, I ain't never felt that feeling again. Only time I ever feel love is when I walk on stage. Let that marinate for a second. The only time NBA Youngboy, one of the biggest rappers in the world, with millions of fans, 12 kids, over $100 million in earnings, the only time he feels loved is when he's performing in front of thousands of strangers. Not from his mother, not from his father, not from his baby mamas or his friends or his crew, only on stage. Now, Honda and Youngboy's relationship has improved over the years. She's been supportive of his career, she does interviews, she even dropped a viral freestyle that had the internet going crazy. She's proud of her son, and in her own way, she's been there for him, but the damage from those early years, that doesn't just go away. Youngboy has talked about how his mother's absence affected him, how he felt abandoned, how he felt like he wasn't a priority. And when you combine that with his father being locked up, his uncles being dead or in prison, and the streets calling his name, you start to understand why Youngboy became the person he is today. But there was one person, one woman, who gave Kentrell the love he desperately needed. Her name was Alice Gaulden, and she's the reason Youngboy survived long enough to become a rap star. Alice Gaulden wasn't supposed to raise her grandson. She was already in her 60s when Kentrell was born, living in North Baton Rouge on 38th Street in a neighborhood where gunshots were the soundtrack to daily life. But when Kentrell's father went to prison and his mother couldn't provide stability, Alice didn't hesitate. She stepped up. This wasn't some temporary arrangement either. Alice Gaulden became Kentrell's primary caregiver, his protector, his emotional anchor, the only person in his life who loved him unconditionally. In interviews, Youngboy has been painfully honest about what his grandmother meant to him. My grandma was my everything. That was my protection, my comfort, my protector. So as she died, I seen like just this very big difference inside everything. Alice Gaulden's house on 38th Street became Kentrell's sanctuary. While the streets outside were filled with violence, drugs, and chaos, inside her home was the only place where he felt safe and loved. She cooked for him, helped him with homework, disciplined him when he acted up, and most importantly, she made him feel like he mattered. The bond between Alice and Kentrell was different from typical grandparent relationships. She wasn't the fun grandma who spoiled him on weekends. She was his primary parent, his emotional anchor, his only source of consistent love. When other kids had both parents at school events, Kentrell had his grandmother. When other kids got in trouble and faced disappointed parents, Kentrell faced a grandmother who loved him enough to correct him. In his own words, "My grandma gave me anything. My grandma made me feel loved." This wasn't just about material things. Alice Gaulden gave him emotional security that allowed him to develop into someone capable of love and loyalty, even in the midst of chaos. As Kentrell got older and the streets started calling his name, Alice Gaulden became more than just a caregiver. She became his protector against a world that wanted to destroy him. This was the period when young boys in North Baton Rouge were getting recruited by gangs, introduced to drugs, and pulled into cycles of violence that usually ended in death or prison. Alice Gaulden understood what was happening around her. She'd lived in North Baton Rouge long enough to see how the game worked. Young boys without fathers, without guidance, without hope, they'd get seduced by the fast money and respect that came with street life. Then they'd end up dead or locked up before they turned 20. She was determined not to let that happen to her grandson. But protecting Kentrell wasn't easy. He was already showing signs of the trauma and anger that would later fuel his music. He was getting into fights at school, acting out at home, and starting to gravitate toward the same streets that had claimed his father and uncle. Alice Gaulden had to walk a fine line between giving him love and setting boundaries that would keep him alive. Youngboy would later rap, referencing how his grandmother knew his true character even when others doubted him. "You watched me since I was a little boy as my grandma raised me. You know I ain't no hoe." When Kentrell started getting serious about music around 2014, Alice Gaulden became his first and most important supporter. While other adults in his life were skeptical about rap being a real career path, his grandmother encouraged his artistic expression. She understood that music might be his way out of the streets. This support was crucial during Kentrell's early development as an artist. He was writing songs about pain, trauma, and street life, topics that might have concerned other guardians. But Alice Gaulden understood that her grandson was processing his experiences through music. She recognized that this creative outlet was healthier than the alternatives available in their neighborhood. Alice Gaulden's house became Kentrell's first recording studio. She let him set up equipment in his room, didn't complain when he stayed up late working on songs, and even listened to his early tracks with genuine interest. For a teenager trying to find his voice as an artist, having that level of support from the person who mattered most to him was invaluable. When he needed money for studio time, she found ways to help. When he needed transportation to recording sessions, she made it happen. When he needed someone to believe in his dreams, she was there. As Kentrell's music career started gaining momentum in 2016, Alice Gaulden's health began declining. She was getting older, dealing with the stress of raising a teenager in a dangerous environment and facing her own health challenges. But even as her physical condition deteriorated, her emotional support for her grandson never wavered. This period was particularly difficult because Kentrell was starting to experience success with his music, but he was also getting deeper into street life and legal troubles. Alice Gaulden was watching her grandson achieve his dreams while simultaneously making decisions that could destroy everything he was building. The stress of this situation took a toll on Alice Gaulden's health. She was worried about Kentrell's safety, concerned about his legal issues, and struggling with her own physical limitations. But she continued to be his primary source of emotional support, even when she was dealing with her own problems. Alice Gaulden's declining health meant that Kentrell was starting to face the possibility of losing the only person who had ever truly loved him. This fear began showing up in his music, with references to mortality, loss, and the importance of family becoming more prominent in his lyrics. And then, she was gone. The exact date of Alice Gaulden's death isn't widely publicized, but it happened sometime between 2016 and 2017, right as Youngboy's career was taking off. In his own words, "So as she died, I seen like just this very big difference inside everything." When Alice Gaulden passed away, NBA Youngboy lost more than just his grandmother. He lost the only person who had ever loved him unconditionally. The impact of this loss cannot be overstated because it fundamentally changed who he was as a person and as an artist. The young man who had always been intense and emotional became even more isolated and guarded after losing his grandmother. Alice Gaulden's death left a void in Youngboy's life that nobody else could fill. She had been his protector, his comfort, his source of unconditional love, and his emotional anchor. Without her presence, he was forced to navigate the world without the one person who had always been in his corner. The timing of Alice Gaulden's death was particularly devastating because it came just as Youngboy's career was really taking off. He was achieving the success that she had always believed he could reach, but she wasn't there to see it or share in his accomplishments. The person who had supported his dreams from the beginning was gone just as those dreams were becoming reality. "When she died, I ain't never felt that feeling again. Only time I ever feel love is when I walk on stage." This statement reveals the profound impact of Alice Gaulden's death on his emotional development. The loss of unconditional love at such a crucial time in his life left him unable to trust or connect with people in the same way. The grief from losing Alice Gaulden also became a major theme in Youngboy's music. Songs about loss, pain, and the absence of genuine love became more frequent in his catalog. He was processing his grief through his art, but he was also sharing his pain with millions of fans who connected with his vulnerability. But before Alice Gaulden died, before Youngboy became a rap superstar, before the fame and the money and the millions of fans, there was a little boy trying to survive in the streets of North Baton Rouge. And that little boy was about to experience traumas that would shape him into the artist we know today. Before we talk about Youngboy's entry into the streets, we need to talk about an incident that happened when he was just a toddler, an incident that left permanent scars, both physical and emotional. Kentrell Deshaun Gaulden broke his neck as a young child, not fractured, not sprained, broke his neck. According to interviews with his mother, Shirhonda, Kentrell was wrestling and playing in the house with friends, just regular kid stuff. But at some point he fell off the bed and landed wrong. He came to his grandmother or mother saying his neck hurt, but he wasn't making a huge deal out of it. He cried, but he wasn't screaming or acting like something was seriously wrong. They took him to the hospital and the doctors examined him. The initial diagnosis? A neck strain. Nothing serious. They sent him home with a soft neck brace, one of those foam collars you can take on and off. But a week later, Kentrell was still complaining that his neck hurt, so they took him back to the hospital for a second opinion. That's when the doctors discovered the truth. Kentrell's neck was actually broken. Not strained, broken. The hospital had missed it the first time. They'd sent a child home with a broken neck, thinking it was just a minor strain. In Shirhanda's words, they said strain and break is the same thing. Even when you have a fractured arm, they'll still put it in a sling. They just had it in a little soft neck thing you could put on and off at first. Once they discovered the break, Kentrell had to wear a halo brace, a medieval-looking contraption that screws into your skull and keeps your head completely immobilized while your spine heals. For a young child, this was traumatic. He couldn't move his head. He couldn't play like other kids. He was trapped in this device for months. And when the halo brace finally came off, Kentrell was left with 3 permanent scars on his forehead. Scars that are visible to this day. Those scars became a part of his identity. They're in every photo, every music video, every interview. They're a constant reminder of childhood trauma, of pain, of survival. But they also became ammunition for his enemies. Over the years, Youngboy's opponents have used those scars to mock him, calling him Denthead and making jokes about his appearance. It's cruel, but it's also revealing. Those scars represent a moment when Youngboy was vulnerable, when he was just a kid who got hurt, and his enemies used that vulnerability to try to hurt him again. But here's what's important to understand. That broken neck, those scars, that trauma, it was just the beginning. Because while Kentrell was recovering from his physical injuries, he was also being exposed to violence and loss that would break him in ways that couldn't be fixed with a halo brace. When Kentrell was just 10 years old, he lost one of his closest childhood friends to gun violence. His name was David Cobb, but everyone called him Lil Dave. Lil Dave was about 6 years older than Kentrell, but they were tight. In the streets, age doesn't always matter. What matters is loyalty, respect, and who's willing to ride for you. According to Youngboy's lyrics, Lil Dave was the one who taught him how to smoke, shoot dice, and get money for sneakers. He was like an older brother, showing Kentrell the ropes of street life. On the song Life, Youngboy raps about how Lil Dave influenced him, teaching him the game at a young age. But on March 27, 2010, everything changed. A memorial picnic was being held at a park on Woodpecker Street in Scotlandville, Baton Rouge. This event was intended to honor the memory of local teens who had lost their lives to gun violence. Think about that for a second. A peace rally, a memorial for kids killed by guns, a community coming together to say, enough is enough. Hundreds of people showed up, families, friends, community leaders, kids from the neighborhood. It was supposed to be a day of healing, of remembrance, of hope. But unfortunately, the very thing that this event was intended to shed light on would end up happening that same day. At some point during the picnic, a fight broke out. Words were exchanged, tensions escalated, and then bullets started flying. One of those bullets hit 16-year-old David Cobb in the spine. Lil Dave was killed at a memorial for gun violence victims. The irony is devastating. The tragedy is unimaginable. Despite there being hundreds of witnesses at the park that day, Lil Dave's murder went unsolved. Nobody talked. Nobody cooperated with police. The code of the streets, don't snitch, don't talk to cops, handle it yourself, meant that Dave's family would never get justice. They were left grieving without closure, heartbroken that their child lost his life at an event that was supposed to honor teens losing their lives to gun violence. And 10-year-old Kentrell, he was devastated. Lil Dave wasn't just a friend. He was a mentor, a big brother figure, someone who looked out for him in a world where nobody else did. And now he was gone, killed in broad daylight in front of hundreds of people, and nobody was going to pay for it. Years later, Youngboy would rap about the loss of Lil Dave and the effect it had on him. On For Keeps with Rich the Kid, he raps that Dave was killed by a chopper and that he wishes he could call him. On Homicide, Youngboy expresses his desire to get revenge and kill the person who took Dave's life, saying he knows Lil Dave is still with him. On Pour One, he speaks about Dave's death, turning his heart cold and making him become a killer. On Cage Feeling, he talks about how losing Dave at such a young age changed him fundamentally. On Better Man, Youngboy claims to be tormented by the image of Lil Dave's murder in his mind. And on How I'm Living, he vows to make the people responsible bleed for what they did to Dave. There's even an unreleased track called Hold 13 that appeared in a trailer for his album Top, where some fans believe Youngboy is confessing that when he made his first $20,000, he spent it on a hitman to get revenge on Lil Dave's killer. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. But what we do know is that Lil Dave's death had a profound impact on young Kentrell. He was 10 years old when he witnessed the aftermath of his friend's murder. 10 years old when he learned that violence could take someone away in an instant. 10 years old when he realized that the streets don't care about peace rallies or memorials or families crying for their children. The streets only care about survival. And if Kentrell was going to survive, He needed to become someone the streets couldn't touch. With his father locked up, his mother absent, his grandmother struggling to protect him, and his friend murdered in front of hundreds of people, Kentrell made a decision. He was going to jump off the porch. He was going to become a product of his environment. He was going to become everything the streets taught him to be. By the time Kentrell was 13 or 14 years old, he had dropped out of school in the 9th grade and was fully immersed in street life. Remember what he said in interviews. After his grandmother died, he started robbing. He started taking from people. He started doing exactly what his father and uncle had done before him. In his own words, "I grew up taking. I grew up stealing, taking from people. At first, my grandma took care of me, and when my grandma died, it started catching my attention at a younger age. I got booked for robbery at age 14. At 14 years old, Kentrell caught his first robbery charge and was sent to juvenile detention for 6 months. Think about that. 14 years old, locked up in Juvie, surrounded by other kids who had also been failed by the system, failed by their families, failed by society. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn, because those 6 months in juvenile detention might have actually saved Kentrell's life. While he was locked up, Kentrell started writing music. He wrote at least 25 songs with no beats, just lyrics pouring out of him. Raw emotion, pain, anger, hope, dreams. In his own words, it was basically how I was feeling. It helped me learn how to express myself. I ain't gonna say it was the best thing that happened to me, but it helped me know my purpose. It helped me know what I wanted to do. Music became his therapy, his outlet, his escape from the cycle of violence and poverty that had claimed his father, his uncles, his friends. When Kentrell got out of Juvie, he had a choice. Go back to robbing and end up dead or in prison like everyone else in his family, or pursue music and try to make it out. He chose music, but Kentrell still needed a stable place to live. His grandmother had passed away, his mother was still working multiple jobs and dealing with her own life, and his father was locked up. That's when he met OG 33 and his mother, Monique. According to the story, Kentrell met 33 while riding his bike down Chippewa Street. They became friends, and eventually, 33's mother Monique took Kentrell in like he was her own son. In OG 33's words, "We got the same mom. That's my baby brother. I always look out for him, always take care of him." Monique became Kentrell's second mother, or really his first consistent mother figure after his grandmother died. She gave him a home, stability, and support. And 33, he became Kentrell's brother, his partner, his day one. Together, they would start stealing car batteries out of 18-wheelers to sell so they could afford studio time. They were hustling, grinding, doing whatever it took to make Kentrell's rap dreams a reality. But even as Kentrell was pursuing music, the streets weren't done with him yet. On November 2nd, 2016, Kentrell's cousin Bozilla was shot and killed. The details are murky, but rumors suggested that it wasn't TBG, Top Boy Gorillas, who killed him. It was shooters from a crew called Forever Loyalty. Just a couple hours after Bozilla was killed, Kentrell and his homies decided to slide on the ops. They spotted their enemies on the street and started shooting from their car. But the ops shot back. One of the bullets hit Kentrell's friend, NBA Joe, in the neck. The cops found Kentrell a couple weeks later and hit him with 2 counts of attempted murder for the drive-by shooting. This was it. This was the moment that could have ended everything. Kentrell was 16 years old, facing serious time in prison, and his rap career had barely even started. If he got convicted, he was looking at decades behind bars. He'd become just another statistic, another young black man from Baton Rouge who didn't make it out. But Kentrell got lucky. His lawyers worked out a deal with the prosecutors. Instead of going to trial for attempted murder, Kentrell pleaded guilty to aggravated assault with a firearm. He spent a few months in prison, and when he got out, he was put on probation. Think about how close he came to losing everything. If that plea deal hadn't gone through, if the prosecutors had pushed for the attempted murder charges, if the judge had thrown the book at him, NBA Youngboy as we know him today would not exist. He would just be another kid from 38th Street who died or went to prison before he turned 20. When Kentrell came home from prison, he dropped the track Untouchable. And in that song, you can hear the shift in his mindset. He raps about maintaining, staying on his grind, not slipping or fumbling. He talks about wanting to move to LA where he doesn't have to keep a gun on him. He says his dreams are coming true, but he's surprised because he didn't think he'd make it this far. It sounded like Youngboy wanted to switch up how he was moving. He wanted to stay away from the streets, away from the legal drama, away from the violence. But as we all know now, that's not how it went down. because even as Youngboy's music career started taking off, the streets kept pulling him back in. The beef with his former crew, TBG, was escalating. People were dying, and Youngboy was caught in the middle of a war that would claim lives on both sides. But before we get into the deadly gang war that would define Youngboy's career, we need to talk about how he went from a kid writing songs in Juvie to one of the biggest rappers in the world. We need to talk about how NBA Youngboy was born. After getting out of juvenile detention, Kentrell was determined to make it as a rapper. He had the talent, the pain, the stories, he just needed the platform. In April 2015, at just 15 years old, Kentrell released his first mixtape, Life Before Fame. Life Before Fame featured tracks like Homicide and Range Rover, showcasing a 15-year-old with skills far beyond his years. The album opened with an intro where Youngboy mentioned an affiliate named D-Dog catching a body, immediately setting the tone that this wasn't some kid playing rapper, this was someone with real ties to the streets. Throughout the project, Youngboy painted a menacing picture of his position in the local gang hierarchy, mentioning how he could rely on NBA Lil Pap to go handle business for him. He also shared his experience with revenge, talking about how he witnessed somebody put his uncle's killer in a casket and how the deceased man's brother was now after him. This first mixtape was released under the banner of TBG, Top Boy Gorillas, the crew that initially took Youngboy under their wing. But as we discussed earlier, that relationship would soon turn sour. By December 2015, Youngboy had left TBG and started his own crew with OG 33 and Montana, Never Broke Again, or NBA. The name came from a moment when they were all sitting on the porch and Youngboy said he wasn't trying to go broke anymore. Everyone agreed, and just like that, NBA was born. In OG 33's words, when we was on the porch one day, it was like, we ain't trying to go broke no more. And then he was like, I ain't trying to go broke never. So we never broke again. That's where NBA started from. From December 2015 to October 2016, Youngboy went on an absolute tear, releasing project after project. Mind of a Menace in December 2015, Mind of a Menace 2 in April 2016, Before I Go in June 2016, and 38 Baby in October 2016. September 21st, 2016, that's the day everything changed. Youngboy dropped the music video for 38 Baby, and it was like lightning in a bottle. The song was a window into his life, drinking lean, smoking with demons, sending hitters at people, not being able to go anywhere without being armed. The music video showed Youngboy and his crew toting firearms, living the life he was rapping about. People were shocked to see someone so young surrounded by so much danger, communicating such a stark reality so clearly over a catchy beat. The song went viral. To this day, the 38 Baby music video has over 100 million views on YouTube. This was the moment. This was when NBA Youngboy went from a local Baton Rouge rapper to a national phenomenon. The full 38 Baby mixtape dropped on October 28, 2016, and it came with major cosigns from Louisiana legends. Kevin Gates appeared on the track Ain't Too Long, and he was so impressed with Youngboy that he got a portrait of him tattooed on his right leg. Boozy Badass invited Youngboy to feature on his track My Lil No I, giving him the stamp of approval from one of Baton Rouge's most respected rappers. And just a week later, Youngboy dropped Mind of a Menace 3, which featured a remix of his song Murder with Atlanta blood rapper 21 Savage. With all this momentum, the music industry came calling. Record labels were offering multi-million-dollar deals, managers and agents were fighting to represent him. And that's when Fee Banks entered the picture, a Louisiana industry legend who had helped Lil Wayne start Young Money and previously managed Kevin Gates. Fee began advocating for Youngboy, putting him in position to field offers from major labels. But here's what made Youngboy different from other rappers. He didn't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect deal, he just kept dropping music. While other artists were dropping one project a year, Youngboy was dropping 4 or 5. While other artists were overthinking every song, Youngboy was recording his raw emotions and putting them out immediately. This strategy of flooding the market with music would become his signature move. It kept fans engaged, kept his name in the conversation, and built a loyal fan base that would ride with him through everything that was about to come. By the end of 2016, 16-year-old Kentrell Gaulden had transformed into NBA Youngboy, one of the hottest young rappers in the game. He'd survived a broken neck, the loss of his grandmother, the murder of his best friend, an attempted murder charge, and the dangerous streets of North Baton Rouge. He'd gone from stealing car batteries to pay for studio time to fielding million-dollar record deals. He'd gone from sleeping on an air mattress at Montana's house to performing sold-out shows across the South. But success came with a price. Because as Youngboy's star rose, the target on his back grew bigger. The beef with his former crew TBG was escalating into a full-blown gang war. People were dying, and Youngboy was caught in the middle of it all. The streets that raised him weren't ready to let him go. So where does that leave us today? NBA Youngboy is one of the biggest rappers in the world. He's had multiple #1 albums. He's accumulated billions of streams. He's made over $100 million. He has 12 children. He has millions of fans who would die for him. But he's also been arrested multiple times. He's been on house arrest for years. He's been involved in shootings, legal battles, and a deadly gang war that's claimed multiple lives. And through it all, he's carried the trauma of his childhood. The absent father, the neglectful mother, the grandmother who died, the friend who was murdered, the streets that tried to kill him. Remember what he said, "My grandma made me feel loved, and when she died, I ain't never felt that feeling again. Only time I ever feel love is when I walk on stage." That's not just a bar. That's a cry for help. That's a young man saying he's never felt genuine love since his grandmother died. That the only time he feels valued, appreciated, or loved is when thousands of strangers are screaming his name. Youngboy has 12 kids with multiple women. Some people clown him for it, but when you understand his background, it makes sense. He's trying to build the family he never had. He's trying to give his children the love and stability that he never received. He's trying to break the cycle of abandonment that defined his own childhood. In interviews, Youngboy has talked about how important his children are to him, how he wants to be there for them in ways his father never was for him. He's not perfect. Nobody is. But he's trying. And through it all, music has been his therapy. Every song is a window into his pain. Every lyric is a piece of his trauma being processed in real time. Every album is a chapter in the ongoing story of a young man trying to survive in a world that's been trying to kill him since birth. That's why his fans connect with him so deeply, because they hear the authenticity, they hear the pain, they hear someone who's been through hell and is using music to make sense of it all. But perhaps the most important part of this story is Alice Gaulden's legacy. She never intended to influence hip-hop culture or impact millions of people around the world. She was simply a grandmother trying to raise her grandson with love and protection in a dangerous environment. By providing NBA Youngboy with unconditional love during his formative years, she indirectly shaped one of the most influential artists of his generation. The emotional depth that makes Youngboy's music so powerful can be traced back to Alice Gaulden's influence. She taught him what genuine love felt like, which allowed him to recognize its absence and express that pain in ways that resonate with millions of fans who have experienced similar loss. Alice Gaulden's values, loyalty, family, protection of the vulnerable became central themes in Youngboy's music and influenced an entire generation of young people who look up to him. The work ethic that Youngboy displays, constantly dropping projects and staying in the studio, reflects Alice Gaulden's influence. She showed him the value of dedication and sacrifice by giving up her golden years to raise him. Alice Gaulden's legacy lives on through every song Youngboy creates, every fan he touches, and every life he influences. She was the only person who loved him before he was rich, and that love became the foundation for an empire that continues to grow and impact the world. NBA Youngboy isn't just a rapper, he's a survivor. He's a product of his environment. He's a young man who's been through more trauma by age 20 than most people experience in a lifetime. And he's using his music to process that trauma, to tell his story, and to give a voice to millions of people who've experienced similar pain. This is the story of the Gaulden family, the broken homes, the absent parents, the grandmother who tried to save a child from the streets, and the cold reality of North Baton Rouge that shaped one of rap's most prolific and controversial artists. Alice Gaulden may be gone, but her love lives on through every song, every performance, every moment that NBA Youngboy steps on stage and feels that love from the crowd. Because at the end of the day, that's all any of us really want. To feel loved, to feel valued, to feel like we matter. And for NBA Youngboy, that feeling only comes when he's doing what his grandmother always believed he could do, making music that touches millions. Rest in peace, Alice Gaulden. You raised a superstar.